Hello and welcome. So I guess you've noticed that this is a different video from what I normally do. I just thought I'd start just this new series on the channel all about the mistresses of the monarchs of Europe. So when a king has his mistress, normally this relationship tends to be a love match, because marriages in that time were often arranged for political purposes. So the king and queen won't actually be in love with each other. They may absolutely hate each other. They wouldn't find each other attractive in any way at all. So by taking a mistress, the king is basically choosing for himself. He could be in love with her. He will find her sexually attractive. And some mistresses were able to hold a lot of power in the court, even more so than the queen. So the first mistress in this series is Mary Boleyn. You probably recognise her last name because she was the older sister of Anne Boleyn, who became King Henry VIII of England's second wife. Now, with Mary, there is actually a lot of debate between historians as to whether she was, in fact, indeed the mistress of two kings of Europe. But we are going to feature her anyway because the general consensus is that she was a mistress of a monarch. So Mary Boleyn, like I said, was the elder sister of Queen Anne Boleyn of England. She was born sometime between 1499 and 1501. Her parents were Thomas Boleyn, who was a courtier and a diplomat, and Elizabeth Howard, who was a member of the very powerful Howard family, who amongst other titles were Dukes of Norfolk. As well as having a younger sister, Mary also had a younger brother called George. The three of them all grew up in Hever Castle in Kent, where they were all educated together. So George received a different sort of education from Mary and Anne, basically because he was a boy, so he would have received an education for a young man of his status, while Mary and Anne would receive an education suitable for their position in life. They were taught arithmetic and grammar, history, spelling and writing, as well as the more feminine topics that the women at the time should know, including embroidery, dancing, etiquette, household management, needlework, music and singing. Though they were also taught fun things like sports and games like cards, chess, archery, falconry, riding and hunting. Now in 1514, the most amazing opportunity arose for Mary. King Henry VIII's younger sister, Princess Mary, was going to France to marry the aged French King Louis XII. Thomas Boleyn managed to get the 15-year-oldish Mary a position as a maid of honour to Princess Mary. So Mary Boleyn went off to France with Princess Mary to wait on her while she was basically like a Queen of France. But Princess Mary's marriage did not last long, with the French king dying shortly after they wed. So Princess Mary ended up returning to England, but Mary Boleyn stayed in France. And she became a member of the new French king, Francis I, court. So Mary had, by all accounts, a whale of a time in France. It is said that she took a lot of lovers, amongst them the new king, Francis I, who very kindly said of Mary that she was a very great whore, the most infamous of all, and who apparently referred to her as the English mare. But Francis saying this should really need to be taken with a pinch of salt. There is not actually any French records at all saying that Mary and Francis did have a relationship. It could have been some gossip that was just put about when Mary's sister Anne was having her fall from grace, like trying to discredit the whole family. So Mary Boleyn eventually returned to England in 1519 when she became a lady-in-waiting to Queen Catherine of Aragon. She was also married off to William Carey, who was a courtier of the Privy Chamber and a distant relative of the king's. King Henry even attended their wedding. Now, because she was kind of like in the king's inner circle, Mary started to spend more time at court, and this is where she caught the king's eye. Henry took a liking to Mary and made her his mistress. So even though she was the king's mistress, Mary never benefited from her relationship with Henry like his other mistresses did. She never received any jewels or any tokens from him, though her husband did. He received grants of land and really decent positions in the royal household. So while she was the king's mistress, Mary gave birth to 2 children, Catherine in 1524 and Henry in 1526. It was rumoured that Henry had fathered at least one of her children, but this is possibly not true, as Henry never acknowledged either of her children as his own. And we know he didn't really have a problem with acknowledging bastard children as his own, as he had already done that with his son to Bessie Blount. Now, when Mary had been in France, her father had been made the English ambassador to France. So he and Anne had gone over to France as well. When Mary returned, Anne had stayed in France to get a little bit of a French education, but then she returned to England in 1522. She became maid of honour to Catherine of Aragon, but then around 1527 she caught King Henry's eye and he wanted to make her his new mistress. Anne refused to become his mistress like what her sister had, so this made Henry determined to marry Anne. So now by this time Mary's relationship with Henry had ended. She was living her life with her husband and her children happily until 1528, when her husband William died from the sweating sickness. Now, if you don't know, the sweating sickness, also called something like the Tudor illness or Tudor disease, was this illness that seemed to just happen during the Tudor period. You'd get really ill with it, you obviously be sweating, you'll be hot, you'll be cold, you just feel generally really rubbish. You'd either survive from it or within 12 hours you would be dead from it. So William died of the sweating sickness and he actually left Mary with loads of debt. So Anne took over the warship of Mary's son Henry and made sure he got a decent education, and she also arranged for Mary to receive a £100 annual pension. Now in 1533 King Henry managed to divorce his wife Catherine of Aragon and marry Anne Boleyn. But because Henry had already had a relationship with Anne's sister, he needed to get some sort of special permission from the Pope to be able to marry Anne, else it would have been considered incest for some reason. So now Anne was married, but Mary wasn't going to sit around being a widow for the rest of her life. So she decided to marry again. But to be able to marry again, Mary would need to ask permission from the king to do so. Now Mary did not want to do this because the man that she had chosen to be her next husband was not someone suitable for the sister of the Queen of England. She had chosen William Stafford, the second son of an Essex landowner. He was a soldier, he had a small income and his prospects weren't all that great. But Mary really loved him, so they married in secret, but soon they were found out. Everything then completely blew up. Anne was absolutely furious with Mary. Her whole family disowned her and she was banished from court. Now eventually Mary and William II started to run out of money, so she went begging to King Henry's chief advisor Thomas Cromwell. She just wanted to be able to speak to her sister and brother-in-law, but she wasn't able to do so. So then she did ask him to speak to her father, her uncle and her brother for her, but they were not interested. In the end, Anne did feel a bit sorry for her sister, so she sent her a gold cup and a bit of money. But Mary was never allowed to come to court again. So after this, Mary kind of disappears. In 1536, both her brother and sister Anne and George were arrested and thrown into the Tower of London on numerous charges. But there is never actually any evidence that she went and visited either of them while they were in the tower, and nor is there any evidence that she ever visited her parents again before their death. Mary herself died on either the 15th or the 30th of July, 1543. So that is the life of Mary Boleyn, the great and infamous whore. I hope you enjoyed this video and this new little series that I'm going to be starting on the channel. If you did, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye.